When a man is fighting his feelings for you, the most confusing part is the mixed signals he sends. One moment, he's warm, engaging, and fully present, making you feel like the most important person in the room. Then, just as quickly, he pulls away, becomes distant, or acts indifferent. This kind of inconsistency can be frustrating, but it's one of the clearest signs that his emotions are at war with his logic. He might not even realize how much he's revealing through his behavior. At times, he might go out of his way to initiate conversations, ask about your day, or show genuine concern for your well-being. He might text you randomly or find excuses to be around you. But then, as soon as he starts feeling too close, he suddenly stops. You're left wondering if you did something wrong or if he lost interest, when in reality, it's his own internal battle making him pull back. He might convince himself that getting too close to you will make him vulnerable, so he withdraws in an attempt to regain control. This cycle continues, getting close, then pulling away. When he's feeling emotionally strong, he lets his guard down and enjoys your company. But the moment he realizes he's opening up too much, he quickly retreats. This is because deep down, he knows his feelings are growing, and that scares him. Some men aren't comfortable with emotions, especially if they've been hurt before, or have convinced themselves that caring too much is a weakness. You may also notice him acting differently in group settings versus when he's alone with you. Around others, he might downplay his interest, keeping interactions casual to avoid suspicion. But when it's just the two of you, his energy shifts. He listens more intently, his eyes linger longer, and he genuinely enjoys your presence. This is because in those moments, he forgets to suppress his emotions. But as soon as he realizes how much he's enjoying being with you, he might overcompensate by acting distant the next time you see him. Even his body language betrays him. He might face you directly when speaking, lean in when you talk, or find small excuses for physical contact, brushing off a piece of lint from your sweater, adjusting your bracelet, or playfully nudging you. But then when he catches himself doing these things, he might suddenly put physical distance between you, cross his arms, or look away. It's like his subconscious is constantly revealing what he's trying to hide, and he's in a battle to regain control. Then there's the way he reacts when you show interest in someone else. If he were truly indifferent, he wouldn't care. But if he suddenly acts irritated, makes sarcastic comments, or changes the subject, that's his way of masking jealousy. He might not say it outright, but his body language and energy shift whenever another man is mentioned. This is because, despite his efforts to fight his feelings, the thought of you being with someone else unsettles him. Even his conversations with you may reflect his internal struggle. He may jokingly tease you about your dating life or act like he doesn't care about your romantic choices, but there's always an undertone of curiosity. He might ask seemingly casual questions about who you've been spending time with, how your weekend was, or what kind of guy you like. He frames these as innocent inquiries, but the truth is, he's fishing for information without making it obvious. And yet, despite all these signs, he won't fully express how he feels. Instead, he lets his actions speak louder than his words. He'll find ways to help you, support you, and show up for you without ever admitting that he cares deeply. He convinces himself that keeping his emotions under control is the right thing to do, but no matter how much he tries, his heart betrays him. Because at the end of the day, no one fights a battle unless there's something worth fighting for. When a man is fighting his feelings for you, one of the most telling signs is his unpredictability. He might be deeply engaged one day, making you feel like you're the only woman in the world, and then suddenly distant the next. It's as if he's caught between what he wants and what he believes he should do. This inconsistency isn't because he's uninterested. It's because he's trying to resist emotions that are becoming too powerful for him to handle. He might initiate conversations, send you thoughtful messages, or even go out of his way to help you with things. These actions show that despite his efforts to suppress his emotions, he can't help but be drawn to you. But then, almost as if he's realized he's getting too close, he pulls away. You may notice him taking longer to respond to your messages or seeming less available than before. This isn't accidental. He's deliberately creating distance, trying to convince himself, and maybe even you, that his feelings aren't as deep as they actually are. Sometimes he'll show up in your life unexpectedly, not because he has to, but because he wants to. He'll find reasons to be around you, even if they seem small. like asking you for advice on something trivial, casually mentioning that he'll be at the same place you're going, or suddenly remembering a funny story he just had to share. These little moments are his way of maintaining a connection while still keeping his emotions at bay. You may also notice how he reacts when you're around other men. If he truly had no feelings, he wouldn't care. But if you pay close attention, you'll see subtle signs of jealousy. He might not say anything outright, but his body language will shift, his posture stiffens, his eyes follow you more closely, or he suddenly becomes more involved in the conversation. If he teases you about another guy or makes sarcastic comments when you mention someone new, that's his way of masking the jealousy he doesn't want to admit he feels. His conversations with you will also reveal a lot. He might downplay his own romantic interests, almost as if to make sure you don't think he's involved with anyone else. He might bring up topics that subtly test your reaction, asking what kind of guy you're into, making a lighthearted comment about how you two would never work out, or joking that you're the type to break hearts. These aren't just random remarks, they're his way of gauging where you stand without making himself vulnerable. Even when he's distant, he's still paying attention. He remembers small details about you, things you've said in passing, your favorite foods, the way you take your coffee. He may not openly acknowledge his feelings, but the fact that he holds on to these details shows he cares more than he lets on. There are also moments when his guard drops and he forgets to fight his emotions. You'll catch him looking at you a little too long, laughing a little too much at your jokes, or opening up about something personal before quickly changing the subject. In those brief moments, his true feelings slip through. But as soon as he realizes what's happening, he'll shift back into control mode, acting indifferent or even distant again. This push and pull dynamic isn't because he doesn't want you, it's because he wants you more than he's willing to admit. He's trying to maintain control over emotions that feel out of his hands, but the very fact that he's struggling is proof of how deep his feelings run. And eventually, no matter how hard he fights it, emotions always win over logic. One of the clearest signs that a man is fighting his feelings for you is the way he overcompensates in his behavior. He might try too hard to appear unaffected, acting as if he doesn't care or as if you're just another person in his life. But if you look closely, you'll see that his actions contradict his words. He may insist he doesn't have feelings, yet his body language, his reactions, and the way he interacts with you tell a different story. You might notice that he becomes unusually confident or even borderline arrogant around you. He could act like he's unbothered, cracking jokes, making sarcastic remarks, or even teasing you in a way that feels slightly off. This isn't because he doesn't like you, because he does, and he doesn't know how to handle it. His ego might not allow him to be vulnerable, so instead of showing affection, he creates a barrier of playful arrogance or indifference. At the same time, he might act the opposite way in certain moments, showing unusual nervousness or hesitation around you. A man who is truly uninterested doesn't second-guess himself. But one who is battling his emotions might fidget, avoid prolonged eye contact, or stumble over his words when he's caught off guard. He may rehearse what he's going to say in his head before speaking, trying to maintain his composure so that he doesn't reveal what he's really feeling. Another way he overcompensates is by distancing himself physically. He may try to avoid situations where you two could be alone or cut conversations short before they get too personal. But then, contradicting himself, he'll do things that keep you in his life. Liking your posts on social media, asking mutual friends about you, or randomly checking in just to see how you're doing. He's fighting a battle between what he feels and what he's trying to convince himself he should feel. You may also notice that he goes out of his way to prove he's interested in other people. He might casually mention another woman, emphasize how single and happy he is, or even exaggerate his interest in dating. But if you watch his behavior closely, you'll see that it's all a performance. A man who is genuinely interested in someone else doesn't need to put on a show. If he's making sure you hear about his supposed love life, it's likely because he wants a reaction from you. He's testing the waters, seeing if you care, all while pretending not to. Despite all his efforts to act indifferent, his emotions will betray him in unexpected moments. He might show a flash of protectiveness when another man gives you attention, his expression tightening just slightly before he quickly masks it. He may get irritated or defensive when you call him out on his mixed signals, acting as if you're imagining things. But deep down, he knows he's the one sending them. He may also try to make himself seem unavailable, not because he doesn't want to be around you, but because he's afraid of getting too close. He could delay responding to your messages, avoid making plans, or act overly casual when you're together. But at the same time, he never fully disappears. He lingers just enough to stay in your life, never quite letting you move on, but never fully admitting how he feels either. A man who is truly indifferent doesn't have to try this hard to prove it. His overcompensation, his contradictions, and his calculated distance all point to one thing. He's feeling more than he's willing to admit. And eventually, no matter how much he fights it, the truth always finds a way to reveal itself. When a man is fighting his feelings for you, one of the most revealing signs is his emotional inconsistency. He sends mixed signals, leaving you confused about where you stand with him. One moment, he's warm, engaged, and fully present in your interactions. He looks at you like you're the only person in the room, listens intently to what you say, and makes an effort to be around you. But then, almost suddenly, he pulls away. He becomes distant, avoids eye contact, and seems uninterested. This hot and cold behavior isn't because he doesn't care, it's because he cares too much and doesn't know how to handle it. Men who struggle with their emotions often fear vulnerability. They are not comfortable with the idea of exposing their true feelings, especially if they see emotions as a weakness. Society teaches men to be strong, to suppress feelings, and to never let emotions dictate their actions. So when a man starts catching real feelings for a woman, his instinct might be to resist them. He may convince himself that getting attached is dangerous, that opening up could lead to heartbreak, or that being emotionally invested gives someone else too much power over him. This internal struggle creates a push-pull dynamic. He gets close, then pulls away. You might notice that he goes through phases where he initiates conversations, texts you first, and seems genuinely interested in spending time with you. He might even be flirtatious, showing you attention in ways that make you think he's finally embracing his feelings. But just when you start to believe he's coming around, he withdraws. He might stop replying as quickly, cancel plans, or suddenly act like he's too busy to engage. You're left wondering, what changed when, in reality, nothing changed. He's just battling himself. This emotional inconsistency often leads to moments where he seems frustrated, not with you, but with himself. He may act irritated or short-tempered for no apparent reason. Small things might set him off, not because he's angry at you, but because he's angry at himself for feeling things he doesn't want to feel. He knows that his behavior is unfair, that he's leading you in circles, but he doesn't know how to stop. He's trying to maintain control, trying to convince himself that he doesn't care. Yet his emotions keep proving otherwise. In social settings, his inconsistency becomes even more apparent. When you're around other people, he may act indifferent, as if you don't affect him at all. He might avoid standing too close to you, keep conversations brief, or even go out of his way to act casual. But if he sees another man showing you attention, everything shifts. Suddenly, he's watching, listening, reacting. His energy changes, and he might even insert himself into the situation to subtly remind you of his presence. He won't directly admit he's bothered, but his body language will give it away. The tightened jaw, the crossed arms, the sudden need to prove his value in front of you. Another sign of emotional inconsistency is the way he reacts when you try to address his behavior. If you ever bring up his mixed signals, he may become defensive, acting as if you're reading too much into things. He might brush it off, saying he's just busy or that you're imagining things. But his denial isn't because he doesn't care. It's because he doesn't want to admit, even to himself, what's really happening. He doesn't want to confront the fact that his emotions are controlling him more than he's controlling them. Sometimes, his inconsistency manifests in indirect ways, through social media, mutual friends, or random check-ins. He may not talk to you as much in person, but he watches your stories, likes your post, or randomly texts you about something insignificant. He keeps himself in your orbit without fully committing to being present. This is his way of holding on to you while still pretending he's not. He may even disappear for a while only to resurface unexpectedly with some excuse to reconnect. This cycle continues because he's torn between wanting you close and fearing what that truly means for him. A man who is indifferent doesn't play these games. He doesn't have to distance himself, create confusion, or battle with his emotions. His actions are consistent because he's not fighting anything within himself. But when a man is struggling with his feelings for you, his behavior becomes unpredictable, fluctuating between moments of closeness and distance. His heart and mind are at war, and until he resolves that conflict, his actions will continue to reflect his internal struggle. When a man is fighting his feelings for you, one of the clearest signs is his protective nature. Even when he tries to suppress his emotions, his actions betray his true feelings. He may pretend he doesn't care or act indifferent, but deep down, he cannot help but be concerned about your well-being. This manifests in small but significant ways. He checks up on you, ensures you're safe, and subtly steps in when he feels you need help, even if he never openly acknowledges it. For instance, if you're out together with a group of friends and it's late, he might casually ask if you got home safely. He won't make it seem like a big deal, but the fact that he even thought about it says everything. If you're walking in a crowded place, he might instinctively position himself on the outer side of the sidewalk, placing himself between you and any potential danger. If you're not feeling well, he might act like he doesn't care, but you'll notice he suddenly remembers small details. Maybe he suggests you drink more water or brings up a home remedy you once mentioned. These are not the actions of a man who is indifferent. They are the behaviors of someone who is emotionally invested, even if he's unwilling to admit it. Another way his protective nature shows is through his reaction when someone else mistreats you. If a colleague is being rude to you, if a friend disrespects you, or if another man crosses a boundary, he won't be able to stay silent. Even if he doesn't intervene directly, you'll see it in his body language. His jaw tightens, his posture stiffens, and he may start acting differently. He might subtly ask you about the situation later, pretending to be casually curious, but in reality, he's evaluating the situation because he doesn't like seeing you upset. One of the strongest signs that a man is fighting his feelings for you is when he tries to act unaffected, but still takes on the role of protector. He won't want to admit why he cares, but he won't be able to stop himself from caring. He may downplay his actions, saying he's just being a good friend or that it's simply how he is. But deep down, his protective instincts stem from something much deeper. When a man is emotionally involved, his subconscious actions give him away. He might pretend to be distant, but when it truly matters, he'll always show up. If you're facing a tough situation, whether it's work stress, a personal issue, or something that's bothering you, he'll be there, even if it's just in small, quiet ways. He might not give you long speeches or deep emotional conversations, but he will offer practical solutions, try to lighten your mood, or just be present in the moments you need him most. This internal struggle between wanting to keep his feelings hidden and feeling the need to protect you creates a unique dynamic. On one hand, he doesn't want to get too close because he fears vulnerability, but on the other hand, he can't stand the thought of something bad happening to you. This push and pull can be confusing, but it's also a key indicator that he feels more for you than he lets on. Another significant way his protective nature comes through is when other men are involved. If he sees another man showing you attention, his entire energy changes. He might not openly admit jealousy, but his actions will speak for him. He may suddenly become more attentive, engage in conversations he would normally avoid, or even find subtle ways to insert himself into the situation. He doesn't want to act possessive, especially if he's still trying to deny his feelings. But deep down, the idea of someone else taking his place unsettles him. Even in conversations, he may try to act unaffected when you mention another man, but if you pay attention, you'll notice small shifts in his tone, body language, or the way he responds. He might joke about it, act dismissive, or even tease you about it, but all of these reactions come from a place of emotional involvement. If he truly didn't care, he wouldn't feel the need to react at all. Beyond physical protection, he also tries to protect you in emotional ways. He might warn you about people who don't have good intentions, subtly give you advice on situations, or even try to guide you without making it obvious. He wants to make sure you're making the right decisions, not because he's trying to control you, but because he genuinely cares about your well-being. Ultimately, a man who is fighting his feelings for you may never openly say the words, but his protective nature will reveal the truth. His actions will always contradict his words, and no matter how hard he tries to suppress his emotions, they will come through when it truly matters. When a man is fighting his feelings for you, one of the most telling signs is his inconsistency. He swings between being warm and distant, attentive and withdrawn, as if he's in a constant battle with himself over how he should treat you. One moment, he's fully engaged, making eye contact, asking personal questions, and seeming genuinely interested in your life. The next, he pulls away, acts indifferent, and pretends as if you don't matter to him at all. This emotional tug-of-war isn't a reflection of how he feels about you. It's a reflection of his struggle to suppress those feelings. You may notice that when you're alone together, he seems more open, comfortable, and even affectionate in subtle ways. He might give you compliments, listen intently, or even share things about himself that he wouldn't tell just anyone. But as soon as other people are around, his energy shifts. He becomes colder, more distant, or even pretends you're just another person in the room. He might even go out of his way to avoid interacting with you too much in public settings, as if he's afraid someone will catch on to the feelings he's trying to hide. This inconsistency is especially noticeable in the way he communicates. Some days he might initiate conversations, send long messages, or make an effort to keep the interaction going. Then, without warning, he stops responding or keeps his replies short and vague. You're left wondering if you did something wrong, but the truth is, this isn't about you, it's about his internal conflict. He wants to be close to you, but he's also scared of what that means, so he keeps you at a distance, only to pull you back in when he feels like he's losing that connection. Another way this inconsistency plays out is through his emotions. Sometimes he acts jealous or protective, as if he can't stand the thought of another man being interested in you. Other times he acts as if he doesn't care at all, brushing it off like it's none of his business. But deep down, it does bother him, he just doesn't want to admit it. If he's truly indifferent, he wouldn't react at all. But because he's fighting his feelings, he overcompensates by acting like he's unbothered, even when his body language says otherwise. You might also notice that he keeps sending mixed signals when it comes to spending time together. He might make plans with you and seem excited about it, but then suddenly cancel or come up with an excuse at the last minute. Other times, he avoids making concrete plans altogether, as if he's afraid of committing to anything that might bring you closer. This push and pull behavior is a classic sign of a man who is struggling with his emotions. He wants to be around you, but he's scared of what that might lead to, so he keeps you in this emotional limbo. Even in his conversations, his inconsistency is evident. One day, he might open up about his thoughts, his dreams, and even his personal struggles. He makes you feel like you have a deep, meaningful connection. Then, just as you start to feel like he's finally letting his guard down, he shuts you out again. He becomes vague, detached, and acts as if those vulnerable moments never happened. This emotional whiplash can be frustrating, but it's not because he's playing games. It's because he's fighting something within himself. A key thing to recognize is that this inconsistency isn't just affecting you, it's affecting him too. He's not just confusing you, he's confusing himself. He doesn't know whether to let himself fall for you or keep his distance. That's why he goes back and forth, struggling between what he feels and what he thinks he should do. This internal conflict creates a cycle where he keeps pulling you in, just enough to keep you close, but never fully allowing himself to embrace the connection. One of the biggest clues that a man is fighting his feelings is when he tries to convince himself and everyone else that he doesn't care. He might make comments about how he's not looking for anything serious, act uninterested when you talk about dating, or even pretend to encourage you to see other people. But his actions will always betray his words. He might say he doesn't care, but then he gets irritated when you give attention to someone else. He might claim you're just friends, but then he treats you differently from every other woman in his life. These contradictions are proof that he's feeling something deeper, even if he won't say it outright. In the end, his inconsistency is not a reflection of his lack of feelings. It's a sign that he has them, but is struggling to accept them. If he truly didn't care, he wouldn't feel the need to push and pull, to go hot and cold, or to act indifferent one day and deeply invested the next. A man who has no feelings is consistent because he has no reason to be otherwise. But a man who is fighting his emotions will always be unpredictable because he's at war with himself.